All right, I'm Michael Hartzman. Today is Tuesday, May 6th, 2025, and I'm on as always with my partner Dominic Tavella. How are you, Dom?
Doing well, Mike. Happy to see you this evening.
Happy to see you too. So, based on your background, you're in your hobby hole in Florida, I'm assuming.
We're working out of the Florida office this week.
Good for you. How's the weather?
Listen, it's Florida, but even though it's a little warmer than normal, it's bright sunshine and 80s during the day, so there's definitely nothing to complain about.
Good for you. So,
And New
just
York's not doing so bad.
well, it's been raining a lot, but I'm not complaining. Mostly it's been better the last couple of weeks, as you know, because you were here up until the rain started.
Yeah, yeah, go by way the wind goes. That's
Yeah.
where you're gonna find me.
So, you know, the market had a nice little streak, had the best streak in I think 20 years. Trying to recover some of the losses that began really before April 2nd, but that was the kind of the demarcation when the market really fell out of bed. So just a quick update through Friday, the S&P was only down 2.91%. It's given a little back since then. The Dow Jones was only down 2.39, and the Nasdaq was only down 6.72. And I use the word only on purpose because they were down a lot more about 2, 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, Mike. So on the positive, glad you mentioned it. The S&P had a 10-day winning streak, which pretty much wiped out most of the losses over the last month. But at one point, the S&P was down better than 15, 16%, Mike, and the Nasdaq over 20. So we've had a pretty good period here of recouping some of the market volatilities. And it's ironic because I don't know about you, Mike, but we were getting some of the, oh my God, it's going to take us forever to make our money back. It's going to be, could be months, it could be years. And boy, you blink and it happened. So we're grateful for that part. I think both you and I agree the volatility is way from being done, but we'll take it anytime the markets want to go through these kind of periods of recovery.
I think the good news there, Dom, is 2008 is ancient history already. But if you really look at the experience people had in 2020 as related to the stock market, and again in 2022, they do get whipsawed pretty quickly. And if you blink, it changes, right?
This one, I don't know, Mike, because the volatility was so extreme, but it kind of feels or felt differently, at least over the past month or so, feels differently now. I mean, we were going through 5% swings in a day, down, up. And my God, that's the definition of volatility, right? We had gone years where we didn't see a 5, 10% correction.
Yeah.
And in this case, we saw it over a 30-day period and more. So it feels a little queasy for the average investor.
I did say it I think a week ago, that it looked like the market kind of put in a bottom, right? Just below 5,000. And even now with the market giving back some of the gains over the last 2 days, I think the S&P is still hovering around 5,600. So a 600 point move to your point, in a short period of time, that's a big move.
It's a big move, Mike, and look, most of our clients, our investors are long term and have been dealing with some level of volatility. But I think, and it may have been one of your notes, Mike, that we haven't seen this kind of investor stress. I mean, they're going back to what happened after 9/11. They're going back at what happened after the 08, 09 financial crisis. Emotionally, they're going back to what happened in COVID, where people literally died. So it's been a lot. It's been a lot for the average, even the calm, everyday, long-term investor. It's a lot to swallow over a very short period of time.
We're, as I always say, we're a business that loves acronyms, euphemisms, and little quick expressions, whether it's green shoots or transitory inflation. We love to attach things to what's going on. And the expression du jour, Dom, is soft data and hard data.
I was waiting. I was waiting for that one, Mike. I was hoping you would bring that up. Soft data and hard data. And boy, oh boy, are we talking about boiled eggs, or the economy? So, um,
You
uh,
want to tackle that? You want to tackle the soft data and the hard data?
Sure. So we are getting some and jump in, Mike. I might get this one wrong. We're getting some pretty strong, and we're going to call this soft data, where the consumer feels like where we are, where the small business owner feels like where we are, where even large corporate America is good up feeling it right now because of lack of clarity, right? We don't know where the economy is, whether it's even going to continue to grow, whether jobs are going to be created or lost, whether companies are going to have to swallow some of these tariffs or have to pass them on to the consumers. And the consumer, oh my God, I can't possibly have to pay for more stuff at even higher price. All these unknowns have the consumers and businesses feeling a little queasy. But the hard data, we got employment numbers last Friday. They were pretty good, Mike. They were not bad. And generally speaking, the economic data is a little softer than what we would want, hoped for, but still generally speaking positive, including this past quarter's corporate earnings, which were pretty good. Not great, but pretty good. So the hard data is showing an economy that's being really resilient, and the soft data, consumers, small business, large companies going, oh, I'm feeling a little queasy because of the unknown. So we have these two entities, these two groups of data that seem to be conflicting with each other.
Yeah, and we touched upon that last week when we had Jeff Folk on from Vistage, and that was 100% soft data. It was about consumer sentiment in
Yeah.
the small business world, and to your point, it's miserable. Um, Unfortunately, Dominic, other than the jobs report, as you pointed out, a lot of the hard data is old, right? A lot of the hard data is backwards. But the one number that we got last week that was not great, because it may be a precursor of what to come, is the GDP shrunk. The gross domestic product shrunk. It's not negative. It's not an indication of a recession, but I think the market, although the market closed up that day, I think there's a little bit of a crack in the armor that even without the tariffs taking full effect, the economy shrunk by 0.3%.
Yeah, Mike, and that data itself is a little sloppy. There's a lot of things in that data. That data point usually gets revised, what, two, three times, Mike? So the initial number, everybody takes it with a grain of salt, which I think is why the market didn't overreact to the number. Having said that, there are a lot of cracks in the armor. Now we can sit here and go, they're little cracks, they're hairline cracks. But we are seeing the consumer sentiment number that you just mentioned, consumer spending, where we had the lower income group of Americans clearly in a very tight spot with their spending. We're now seeing the middle class being more reserved with their spending. So I can go on, but the hard data is definitively showing cracks. And we may see that, we'll more likely see that over the next couple of months, Mike, that those cracks get a little bit bigger.
Yeah, yeah, and I think to the administration's credit, they've been quieter, right? They're not flip-flopping on tariffs and raising tariffs again. And a lot of that hysteria and craziness has kind of gone by the wayside. But I still get, in a way that only Trump could do, I still think he's kind of trying to prepare the country that there's going to be some more pain to come, right? Whether the comment he made about having $3 and not $30 and having five pencils said 250 pencils. Now, obviously, the media is going to spill a ton of ink on, on really ridiculous comments that mean nothing at the end of the day, other than, is he still trying to prime the pump that if we have a recession, I told you so.
Yeah, I actually agree on that point, Mike. Look, and things we've brought up in our own conversations and things we've brought up on a prior podcast, but clearly these things just don't happen all that quick. These things being trade negotiations, particularly. There's a big, huge fight in Congress right now about his big budget, beautiful budget deal. It doesn't happen quickly. It doesn't, these kind of negotiations with 200, 190 other countries, with our own congressmen, women, senators, Republican, Democrat, these negotiations take time. And yet we're kind of in a standstill waiting for the outcome. That in itself is probably a self-fulfilling prophecy, Mike, where, hey, we don't want to spend money today because we're concerned about a recession. That in itself slows economic growth, might literally push us into a recession. So I think President Trump is, in full disclosure, in my opinion, trying to kind of prep the country that we might go through a rough patch in here before we see sunnier days. I think
Well,
that's correct, Mike. I think you're
it-
right.
and look, and I think what's likely going to happen, and I've said it 1,000 times, I do not believe he wants to cause a recession. I just don't. No one wants that on their resume. I think what's likely to happen, as we talked about this morning, is he's going to push back the 90-day window because he's going to say countries are negotiating, everyone's in good faith. So we're going to extend the deadline. Before we go to a break, I'm going to put you on the spot. Federal Reserve met today and tomorrow. There's a lot of back and forth between Chairman Powell, the head of the Fed, and Trump. Trump really wants lower interest rates. Powell has been reluctant right from the get-go. He started in December with a wait and see approach. There's some really smart people who think that Powell should cut immediately. Others who think that Powell's 100% right and being reluctant to cut. So I'm going to put it to you. What do you think he does tomorrow?
So the quick answer is nothing. I don't think the Federal Reserve does anything with interest rates. I think they leave them alone because they keep adamantly saying they are data dependent. Well, we got a decent employment number on Friday, Mike. Talk about the most up-to-date, clean data you can get. That number was actually pretty good. So the employment numbers in the country are pretty solid. They don't have a motivation. If unemployment was skyrocketing, they would try to help the economy, so they would lower rates. That's off the table. Inflation has been very slowly, carefully coming down, but not back to their target number. So inflation's not a good motive for them to cut interest rates. They're in wait and see mode. I don't know what pushes them off that, Mike, and I don't think any data we've seen so far does convince them to move off. Now, there might be a little clearer picture in terms of what they might do in June, but I don't think they do anything tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't think they do anything tomorrow either. And I don't even think he's going to throw the administration a bone and indicate he might cut in June. I think they're going to maintain their stance of a kind of wait and see, right? Into the first part of the summer, because I really do think he wants to see what the GDP is like and what's happening to the economy, from kind of
And
April
Mike,
on.
he might get his wish in the context that, again, the economy is slowing down, spending is slowing down, corporate investments is slowing down. So maybe by the time he gets to the summer, there's enough slowing down, and maybe the unemployment rate ticks up just enough that he goes, okay, yeah, we starting to see these cracks get bigger, and now's the time to lower. But I don't know why he's motivated to do it tomorrow. And even if he does, and we've seen this one, Mike, I know we got to go, but the market might go, wait, wait, wait. The data we're seeing doesn't justify a rate cut. So what are you seeing that we don't? The markets actually might interpret that as a negative cut
Oh,
if they proceed.
I have enjoyed the little bit of break we had where good news was bad news and bad news was good news. So, I'd love that cycle that we always have to go through. So you're telling me we may go into that cycle again where bad news is good and good news is bad.
I hope not, Mike, because good news is bad news, and bad news is good. To me, that means people lose their jobs, right? And we don't ever want to see that happen. We want to see the economy grow, and whoever the president is, and whatever administration it is. So we want good news to be good news, and that in our world means inflation continuing to trend down. That's enough positive news for the Fed to be proactive. So hopefully, we see that trend continue, and then they'll have a perfect excuse to cut their rates.
So let's talk about tonight's show. We have an author on tonight, Helen Sheehy. She's written three best-selling not autobiographies, three best-selling nonfiction books. I guess they're biographical. Her book tonight is her first fiction book, Just Willa, and as she will tell us, it's quasi-autobiographical, an autobiography about her mom. So the book starts in 1927 and spans several decades. And we're going to be able to tie in the financial world into her novel. So we're looking forward to that conversation, and we'll be right back with Helen Sheehy, who the new author of Just Willa. All right, I'm Michael Hartzman, back with my partner Dominic Tavella, and our guest this evening, Helen Sheehy, the author of Just Willa, your first foray into fiction. Congratulations on the book, Helen.
Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. Um, as I mentioned to you on the break, my brain short-circuited between biographical and
Mhm.
autobiographical, and I think this book is not autobiographical. Obviously, you weren't alive in 1917, but there's a biographical nature to it because it's been inspired by your mother. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. And boy, I love listening to you and Dom, your conversation about the market. These are the kinds of conversations, well, not as elevated because we weren't in the stock market, around our family table about money and about, you know, what are you going to do tomorrow and how you're going to make a living. We were all brought in on that. So it was really fascinating to hear that.
Thank you.
So, Helens, give us a little background about, I'm going to say your mom,
Sure.
assuming she's the lead character in the book, but give us a little background. Did she
Uh,
emigrate to this country? Was she born
uh,
here?
No, basically, what motivated me to write this was because I left home at 18 and went off to teach theater and write about the theater. I wrote three biographies of theater pioneers, all women. The last one I wrote was the most famous actor in the world, Eleanor Duse, who started a new kind of acting based on a woman as a human being on stage. But after I did that, and this was, I think the last one was published in 2003, and I decided enough biographies. I wanted to go back to my first love, which was writing fiction. But then I realized that I knew more about these strangers, these women. I knew intimate details of their life. I had studied them. I knew so much about them, but I didn't know anything about my own mother and my own father, really. I mean, I left home at 18 and we didn't talk about those things. I mean, my parents didn't keep diaries. There are no archives in our family. We barely had any family photographs left. So I decided, and this was just a purely personal obsession, that I was just going to start researching it and see what I could discover. And then I became obsessed with telling a story, and it had to become fiction because there wasn't enough material to rely on to make it, a memoir or a biography because I didn't have enough facts. But I did have, I could go back to Freedom, Oklahoma, and I could walk the ground on the old homestead. I could talk to her oldest living sister. I could talk to the few people left that I knew in my father's family. And so I started gathering material, and then I just let my imagination take over because basically my mother was the daughter of a homesteader. My dad was a cowboy and a bootlegger and a boxer, and they lived through the Dust Bowl and the Depression. And the other motivation was sort of just tell the story of the Okies who stayed, the Oklahomans who stayed, the ones who didn't flee, the ones who stuck and gritted it out on that farm. So I kind of want to tell that story because it fascinates me. How do people do it? What are the daily details of their life? How do they manage through all kinds of tragedy and loss? And there's a lot of joy too, but it was tough for them. And I wanted to know about that world.
So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, basically, you wrote the opposite story of the Grapes of Wrath,
Yes, kind of. Well, ha, boy, I'd love to be compared to that book. Uh,
right?
yeah,
Just throwing it
I
out
mean,
there.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, but these are the people, like, what happened to those people who stayed? How did they manage? And one of the things I discovered was that, and some of this is true because I was able to rely on, actually, old newspapers were amazing. Um, my granddad, who was the homesteader, who founded, he was very smart because the 160 acres that he homesteaded was the treeless high prairie, and it's the cover picture of the book. It's basically on the old homestead. It's smart because you don't have to pull up all those trees. um, but he was really interested in new farming practices. So basically, he learned from the local agricultural agent, and this was during the drought and the Dust Bowl, that if you terraced land, which cost money to do, it could help save water and help the water from running off the cropland. So he was kind of innovative. He brought electricity to his barn through a battery before he brought it to the house. Did a lot of innovations, had the new Ford truck, um, but not much improvement. I think it was a while before they had indoor plumbing there, probably into the 40s before they really did on that property.
So it sounds like this is the story of America, right? Where you have people that are you call them homesteaders, but I'm thinking of them as entrepreneurs. These are people that
Yes,
are looking to find a better life, a better quality of life, create something, and
absolutely.
typically with sweat and hard work.
Hmm.
Maybe you want to touch a little bit about that part of the story?
Oh God, yes. In fact, yes, that's exactly what it is. In fact, the motto of the state of Oklahoma is labor omnia vincit, which means sort of labor, hard work is everything. And that's kind of how I was raised, that hard work, if you're a hard worker in my family, that was the highest praise you could get, to be a hard worker. You were a hard worker, you never, ever lied. That was a terrible, terrible sin. You were kind and you were clean and you were decent and you paid attention. Otherwise, you could get killed on the farm if you basically didn't pay attention. So absolutely, entrepreneur, that's really interesting because it's not it's not Willa married a man who he was a tenant farmer, so that meant you rented your land. She kind of took a step down when she married Jake, who's basically based on my dad, because she was a daughter of a homesteader. She was the daughter of a landowner who was one of the founders of Freedom, Oklahoma. So when she married Jake, They basically started by renting land, and that meant you farmed on shares. You would get two-thirds of the crop, and the landowner would get a third. And a lot of farmers did that. But what's interesting when you talk about the story of America, one of the things I discovered writing this is that in many ways, and this is just the 20th century, it seems like a lost world. So much has changed. So many values have changed. I remember going to public school in a little town in Oklahoma, and this was in the 50s. And we were tenant farmers, but we were just as good as anybody else. There were kids that had, they had lots of acres, except you never talked about that. That was just poor form to talk about how much land you owned. So your value depended on, were you a hard worker? Were you a good athlete? Were you a good student? Were you a decent person? Were you not a jerk? But somehow there's been a shift over time, I think. Um, but in my family, to get out of that, to become a entrepreneur, and I think basically my brothers and my sister's a different issue, but we all tried to have a better life than our parents did. And one of the ways to achieve that better life was through education. I remember getting so upset with my mother because I wanted to drive the tractor. My brothers were all out in the fields when they were 8, 9 years old. I was driving a truck in the field. I think when I was standing on the seat, I probably was 8, but I wanted to drive a tractor. I threw such a huge fit. I was not allowed to do it, my mother said. So instead, I had to sit in the house and I read. That's what I did. I mean, I read like 5 books a week, probably. But I'm so happy she did that now. But at the time, it was like, why can't I do that? I mean, I had chores, but I wasn't allowed to do that because she had a different vision for me.
And Tom Brokaw wrote the book, The Greatest Generation.
Yes.
And my dad and Dom's dad are a part of that. And Dom and I talk all the time. I'm the son of a truck driver. He's the son of a bricklayer. And
Wow.
all my dad wanted was my brother and I to be college graduates.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
That's all he wanted. He didn't care what we wound up doing. He didn't care what profession we chose.
Right.
He wanted his two sons to go to and graduate college
Mm-hmm.
because he never had that opportunity,
Right.
being a child during the Depression and then going into World War II.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
Well,
Dom, I'm sure
they
you have
all
a
saw
shared.
education as the path, right, to success. So an
Absolutely.
education that perhaps they never had the opportunity to pursue. So it sounds like your parents were in the same mentality, right? That hey, we'll work
Yes.
hard, but education at the end of the day could lead you to a better lifestyle, quality of.
Absolutely. And the character in the book, Willa, is denied. She's only allowed to go to the 8th grade because it costs money to go to the high school in town. And her dad needs her on the farm. Plus, she's a girl, she's going to get married anyway. And so that was always kind of a bitterness for her that she never ever got the education and that she really, really wanted. And she's very intelligent. Um, but yeah, if you're we're talking about World War II in the Jake never had to go because he was a farmer and you were required if you were a farm you got a deferment. But his brother Bill served in the war and was killed. And his disability, his check that he got every month and Jake is the heir to that. I think it was $166 a month. That made a huge difference in that family to get that check. um, was really a big deal. And then, of course, what happens during the Dust Bowl after that when Roosevelt came in, and he really saved them. In my in my family, my mother and father both kind of Roosevelt literally kind of saved their lives in coming out of the drought and the depression. He really made a difference. And also with what he did with polio, with support for kids he had polio, was extremely important to them. So I was raised in that tradition of Roosevelt. He helped us. He helped us survive for those people. And of course, later with Social Security, made such a huge difference in their lives.
So I could see where your own life and your mother's own life really integrate, with Willa and her husband.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And it was funny, we're thinking about talking to you guys, and I realized that throughout the book, there's actually one chapter called Making Money.
Hmm.
Because everybody, if you live on a farm, if you live with this kind of economy, everybody has to work, everybody has to pitch in, and it sounds like you guys were raised the same way. So every bit of money is important. And there's actually one chapter which turns on, it's called The Price of Gas, and the split second decision to double back and get 11 cents a gallon gas instead of going on toward freedom where it's 14 cents a gallon makes a huge difference in Willa's life. I mean, to save 36 cents, everything turns on that. But this is the nitty-gritty detail that these people thought about in living their lives, that every penny was important to them.
Well, Helen, I got to tell you, and you're kind of bringing up some really, I would say, valid points in the context that both myself and Mike have been doing this for 40 some odd years, and especially in our early days, right, Mike, would get new clients on board, and they were children from that era, and their spending habits and saving habits.
Mhm.
Oh my God, talk about engraved in stone. They worked really hard for that money, and they were not
Yes.
frivolous about their spending, and they were
Mm-mm.
very prudent and careful about how they wanted their money invested. So this for us was a real life experience, right, Mike? I mean, I literally remember some of those people and their the way they used to think, and God bless them, but there aren't too many of them left for us to work with. But
But
some
you
really
know,
really stark memories of these people.
the other side of that coin, though, is that you realize, and I think that's why your parents wanted you to get an education, is that's a really hard life. Uh, there was never a vacation in our family. Nobody ever took a vacation. There was no, for my parents, there wasn't leisure until later, much, much later. And so they didn't want that for us. They wanted us to have time to read a book, maybe take a vacation, go someplace else. Because if you're raised on a farm, there are all these animals to take care of, and you have to, you have to be there with them unless you can afford somebody to take care of them. Um, but I think Willa wanted a different life for her children. It doesn't mean that she didn't like her own life. I think she did. I think she wanted to have those children, but it was hard. You know,
So what I want to do is I want to take a break here, and then I'd like to talk about how you developed this character
sure.
in the 60s and 70s, and then I think into the 80s, because I think that's also important, how you really encapsulize that generation and
Hmm.
and all the modern changes that they went through during that time period. It's just mind-boggling.
Sure. Be happy to.
So we'll be right back with I'm sorry, with Willa, with Helen Sheehy, author of Just Willa. All right, I'm Michael Hartzman, back with my partner Dominic Tavella, and our guest this evening, Helen Sheehy, the author. And the book is out already, correct, Helen?
Yes, it was published April 13th.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
The new book, Just Willa, kind of autobiographical about her mom and her family. So we want to talk about your real family in a minute, but let's talk about how you develop Willa's character into middle age, and then as an elderly person in the between the 50s and in the 1980s.
Okay. Um, well, I really wanted it to be the arc of this one woman's life. Um, it's basically, I think it's 7 decades, and how the world changed and what she had to deal with. And one of the things that happens, and some of this is autobiographical, some of it is invented, but it's just the challenges. There's so many different challenges, for example, that tend to go along with what was happening in the world. For example, in the 1940s, one of the characters contracts polio. This is before the polio vaccine, so she has to deal with that. Um, if you move on into the 60s, one of her sons goes to Vietnam. Um, Another daughter, and this is so I'm not giving too much away. It's fine. Uh, Annie, one of the characters, the one who gets polio, also after she graduates from college, she's a stellar student. She gets schizophrenia. So then Willa has to deal with mental health care. How do you do that? How do you manage? How do you figure out how to get her through? And one of the things that she does, and this also happened in reality, is that she actually lives with my sister to get her through her jobs for I think 5 years. It coincides with the time that I was in high school. So she manages her so she can get through these episodes. And what it does, though, it allows her to get Social Security, which some years later allows her to get Social Security disability because she's had enough work experience to do that. And then manages one of the last things is managing to get her into a facility because dealing with anybody with these issues, and I see friends still dealing with it today. What do you do with somebody who has mental illness? There's medication, but then how do you deal with it? And do they have to be hospitalized? And then where do they live? It's an ongoing problem. And I don't think much has changed from the 20th century to the 21st century about that. It's still a real, real difficult issue. Um, Unfortunately, Willa doesn't have to deal with the issues of old age. She did have a little easier life because her sons did become entrepreneurs and were able to help and buy land. But and it doesn't have to work as hard, but it's still there's always that ongoing issue of the daughter that's a schizophrenic because once you're a parent, you're always a parent. I mean that job never ends, no matter how old your children are.
So you kind of hinted at it, Helen, that Willow, obviously a pioneering woman, literally,
Mm-hmm.
literally the definition of the word, and her children growing up. So usually when you grow up in that kind of environment where you don't get the silver spoon, you kind of tend to be very entrepreneurial, very hungry to
Mm-hmm.
succeed.
Mm-hmm.
So did you see a change from mom's attitude about wealth and working spirit to her children, in this case, maybe even your siblings? But did you see a change in that attitude, the evolution of that attitude towards wealth and entrepreneurship?
Oh, absolutely. I think all of my brothers really wanted more. They really, really wanted more. I tended to want more. I wanted to write books. I wanted to maybe be more in academics. But one brother became a chef. The others owned restaurants. So yes, and but the interesting arc, I think, which I think might amuse you, is that all right. So imagine in 1893, the homesteader settles the homestead, builds this farm. He's got 160 acres. Over time, that land increases. My mother actually sold out to her brothers. So the women in that family sold out to the boys. So my uncle, his family, then still holds on to the homestead. And the person who lives there now, my cousin Kai, he has a Angus cattle business. He's an Angus breeder. So what he does is he breeds the bulls, he breeds the cattle that he then sells to the commercial breeders. So he's giving them the stock that they're going to use to build their herds. So, they're breeding for the best kind of what actually the commercial breeders want. They want calf weight, they want really vigorous stock. So get this. So he grazes these cattle on wheat pasture. So he plants wheat that used to be you would plant wheat and you would harvest it and bushel it and sell it. No, no, no. He just plants wheat and he mixes it with crabgrass. So he grazes the cattle on that. And once the wheat is dead, then the crabgrass will sustain them. So these are the grass-fed cattle. I watched his bull auction the other day. I think he sold 5 bulls for $25,000 each, which is, it just seems crazy to me. But now get this, what's happening now in that land, and Kai has added to the old homestead. So now there are thousands of acres there, right? Well, now people are begging him to buy that land. What do you two business guys think that land buyers want with that land now? Which is in Freedom, Oklahoma. There's a Cimarron River there. What do you think they want that land for now?
To build homes.
No,
Oh,
no,
thank God.
no, no, it's not to build homes. Well, imagine Freedom is in northwestern Oklahoma. Nearest big town is Alva, and it's not that big. Woodward is maybe 40,000 miles. Wichita's like 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Oklahoma City's 2 hours. What do you think people would be willing to double the price of an acre, which is probably now it's $1,500 an acre there? What do you
This is a
think
shot in the dark. A wind farm?
No, uh-uh.
Oil and
I
gas.
stumped the business guys. No, this is happening in my old hometown of Protection, Kansas, too. In fact, a friend who owned a ranch there just sold it for this purpose. What do you think is making land so expensive in these areas where there are not any good restaurants? There are cafes or some good diners.
King?
Please don't tell me it's a Tesla factory.
No, God, no.
That was a joke, Helen. Tell us. Come on, tell us.
I know, I get it. So what do you think?
I give up.
Leisure, recreation, hunters from Florida and Georgia and rich guys, they're coming in, they're buying thousands of acres in Kansas, southern Kansas, northwestern Oklahoma. They want to hunt deer because they're prime trophy deer there.
Mm.
They want to they want to visit maybe 2 or 3 times a year, maybe build a house on the river because really there are not any hotels close by. But that's what's happening to that land. And so that land eventually is going to return to the way it was in 1893 when Granddad homesteaded. It's going to be grassland, except then Kai tells me, he says, well, what'll probably happen then, it will all burn because there'll be another drought and it'll just burn up. But that's what's happening to the land.
Went full
Because you're not going to
circle.
build homes because there are no jobs for those
Yeah.
people. Where
Right.
would right?
And just getting back to your brother getting $25,000.
No, my cousin,
Your
cousin
cousin.
Connie.
If you've been to a New York steakhouse recently, you'll
Oh,
you'll know why.
oh, I know. It's a luxury. I think I bought some prime, I think for $18 a pound the other day. Yeah, it's a luxury. I mean, even around there in Oklahoma, most things on the menu now are chicken and pork because beef is different. You need land. You can't put a big factory there with, you're breeding a bunch of chickens or a bunch of hogs in one place. Cattle need space. And, his cattle are having their calves out in the field. there are no calving barns unless you live further north. There will be calving barns, but they're just, they're doing it the old-fashioned way, and it's expensive. If you want grass-fed beef, well, they've got to have room to eat the grass.
Well, to me, that's the definition of marketing your brand to your
Oh,
client, right? So I did
absolutely.
spend I think it was 10 days, 2 weeks in a on a ranch in South Dakota. So kind of familiar with what you're talking about. And the
Right.
rancher was particularly successful at breeding a very specific kind of cow for that very specific reason. And he would get a very substantial premium
Oh,
because of that.
yes.
So again,
Oh,
you're fitting into the market and trying to be an entrepreneur and figure out where you can sell your product at a premium price, premium product at a premium price. So
well,
very,
they
very smart.
right. They came up with another thing I think is so interesting is that Angus cattle are known for their great meat and they're really these blocky, chunky. But think about it. You've got a Holstein cow that you've got to have it's got to have a calf. I mean, it's to get the milk. But then what do you do if a Holstein bred with another Holstein has a bull calf? That meat is no good. So this guy, another entrepreneur, came up, well, wait a minute. What if I bred a Holstein cow with an Angus bull? Then I could do something with that bull calf. I could sell it for beef. And the meat would be a little leaner, but it would be great beef. So that guy, I think he's onto something. So
So
he's going to be buying my cousin's bulls to do that.
so Willa I'm sorry, Helen, getting back to Willa,
Sure, I'm
and
sorry.
and I don't want any spoiler alerts because I do hope to read the book. But do you keep Willa on the farm her whole life,
Oh yeah,
or
she's on the farm her whole life.
a
Not on the,
whole?
well, she goes away. She's on a farm where she and her husband go to farm.
No, but you have her in a rural
Oh
setting,
yeah,
or
it's always rural. She's always living in a rural. One of the things she does though, and she's also an amazing cook, but she becomes one of the things she does, this is toward the end of her life, is she bakes pies for her son's very successful restaurant and club that he started in a place where the closest place to get a drink would be, I don't know, 50 miles away. So it became very successful, very popular, great food. So she would bake the pies and they'd all be gone by 10 o'clock in the morning. I think she'd do like 5 pies and they would be gone.
so now going back to your mom,
Yeah.
and your family, in my experience, we both were raised in New York. We've both been to LA and Chicago. When you run into someone who's raised on a farm, I think more often than not, the city life is just overwhelming. I mean, the
Mm,
hustle and the bustle, and even trying to walk down Fifth Avenue. What's been the experience? Now you're here, right? You're one
right.
of us, but
Right.
but
Exactly.
what has been your experience with
Minus the
your?
cow.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Well, what's been your experience with your family members? Say if they come to visit you in Connecticut and you all go down to the city, do they enjoy it or do they can't wait to get back?
Oh no, they absolutely enjoy it. They love it. But in fact, my brother though, when he came here, here's the thing about, and the Hardesties in this book are like this. He didn't go to New York, the brother. And he was I mean, the man has traveled. He's been to Germany, he was served in the army, but he liked just to stay here and do things and work. Um, if you if you're in my family, you have a hard time not doing something, while you're here. But no, mostly I have cousins who come and they certainly enjoy it. And also I have a lot of rodeo people in my family. Um, one of my dear cousins is five-time world champion roper. So she's traveled a lot. She's seen the world. So no, I mean, being on a farm doesn't mean you're out of touch. I mean, everybody's got internet. Everybody knows, all that stuff. They've traveled to Vegas um, and New York City, but I don't want to. I'm going to New York on Friday, and I'll love it, but I'll be very happy to get back to Connecticut, which seems kind of rural to me compared to New York.
And Helen, Willow obviously in the book was married. Did he passed at some point in the book, or um,
I'm not gonna say.
okay, I'll pass on that one.
I'm not
But
gonna
I
say.
guess I kind of painting Willow as the matriarch of the family, right?
Oh, she definitely
So
is.
and
Oh,
so that I kind of maybe want to end on that. Give her some kudos for being the backbone and the strength of the
oh,
family.
totally, totally true. You know what's so funny? My entire life, I thought I was like my dad, who was the cowboy, the bootlegger, the bullshitter. Oh, can I say that?
Yes, you can.
The the storyteller. But then I realized, no, I'm really like my mother. And my husband, he agrees. I mean, they had a catchphrase, Will and Jake. It's called "Get with it." And she just knew how to hold everything together. There's always somebody in the family that does that, right? And that was the role she played because it certainly wasn't what wasn't my dad. And I think that's true of a lot of farm women, that they're the ones who hold it together. You know, the CEOs of the family.
What was the inspiration behind the name Willa, which is a little unusual?
Oh, my mother's real name is Wilma, and I didn't want to use that. And I also, my writing is nothing like hers, but one of the writers that I love is Willa Cather,
Hmm.
and she wrote about the prairie. Our styles are very different, but maybe a little tip of the hat to her. Um, but the just Willa is, just an ordinary woman, and just Willa, only her. She's the center.
So before we have to close, why don't you tell our audience how could they get your book? Do you have a website? How is it being distributed?
Okay. You can buy Just Willa anywhere. I mean, you can go online, any of the online distributors. You can go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's at Walmart. It's at bookshop.org. Um, Go to your local independent bookstore, and if they don't have it, they'll order it for you. Um, Hopefully it'll be in libraries soon. It's maybe a little too early for libraries. But my website, I'd love to hear from people after they've read the book. It's just HelenSheehy.org. Um, and I have one of the things I did, we were talking about education earlier. I got the eighth grade exam that Willa would have taken in 1931 in Oklahoma. I tried to pass it, I flunked it. It's so hard. It covers every subject. I mean, you practically have to be a veterinarian. There's all these farm stuff. How do you have to figure out how many fence posts to buy? There's no way I could pass that. My neighbor, who's very bright, who was a very bright eighth grader, she couldn't pass it either. So I could throw some questions at my readers. I thought about putting a sample of that in the book. I imagine that Willa gets 100% because she's so smart. But I certainly couldn't pass it.
So Helen, I'll give you one last chance to if there is a life lesson that you want people to come away with from reading the book, what would you say that is?
Oh, I don't know.
If
I
if there
think,
was one.
yeah, I think for me, the lesson is just going through this experience with her.
Because she
And
went through a lot.
she went through a lot, and empathizing with her through that. And I think a lot of it could be summed up with just resilience and get with it. And don't sit around and feel sorry for yourself. Which, by the way, are lessons I learned from the biographies I wrote. Most people that I wrote, these theater pioneers, you just have to keep at it, keep living, keep trying, persevere. And I basically think that's it. I mean, that's what I take. That's what I got from my mother, basically.
Well, those definitely are words of wisdom to close on. And thank you for your time this evening, Helen, and good luck with the book, Just Willa.
It was a
Oh, thank
pleasure,
you.
Helen. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Okay, thank you, Dom. Thanks, Michael. It was a
You're
pleasure.
welcome, Helen. So
Loved it.
we're taking next week off, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with a new edition of the Lebenthal Report. Have a good night, everybody.